The story begins in a certain city. People were going about their everyday routine. A man just came home from work, so he decided to cool off by playing some video games. The next day, as he steps out, heading to work, he immediately has a cardiac arrest and he becomes unconscious. He suddenly wakes up in another world to the sound of voices. He opens his eyes to see a lady standing in front of him and he wonders who she is. The man wonders if he was somehow rushed to the hospital by a good Samaritan and the lady was the nurse on duty. He looks around and he thinks the hospital looks old. A dog starts barking, but it flies across the man's field of vision and the man is surprised to see a flying dog. A maid comes into the room with a tray to tell the lady her tea has been set and the lady thanks the maid. The maid tells the lady her son is cute and the man gets a look at his reflection on her tray. He can't believe he's now a baby and he wonders if he was dreaming. He was born in the 200th year of the summer 4th calendar and he was named Ars Louvent. He was born in Lamberg, which is in the province of Mission. 3 years later, Ars has now grown considerably. He was in the study when a maid knocked on the door and he invited her in. She tells him she brought him some tea and he thanks her for it. He realized that he lost his life in his previous world and he was reincarnated as someone named Ars Louvent. Since his birth, he was able to master reading and writing skills, which made him knowledgeable about the new world. He knows he was born in the Summer 4th Empire, but he had never seen a map like that, which made him realize he was no longer on Earth. He also discovered there was a technique known as magic that people use to conjure mysterious phenomena. He thought the world was just like a game. The Louvent family he was born into was a noble household and they were in charge of managing a small region called Lamberg. Their house was so big and beautiful that Ars thought it was a castle. They had a lot of servants to always look after them, and a live-in chef who made delicious meals for them every day. Ars was glad he was reincarnated into such fortune. Since his birth he also learned that he possessed the power that nobody else did. Ars walks into the training room, which surprises all the soldiers. He greets them and asks them if he can watch them from the safety of the entrance. The soldiers tell him he'll be fine at such a distance. They are surprised the prince was always coming to the training room at such a young age. They were convinced he would be a great warrior when he grew up. Ars walks over to a master teaching a trainee soldier. The master knocks the trainee down and he scolds him, but the trainee gets back up and decides to have another go. Ars uses his appraisal skill on the trainee to look at his stats. He realizes the trainee has great aptitude in archery, and he figures out that the trainee will be good with bows. The master knows the trainee back and the trainee looks exhausted. Ars approaches Malay the trainee and calls out to him, which surprises Malay because he didn't think Ars knew his name. Ars asks him if he's ever used a bow, but Malay tells him he will never use such a weapon because a real man doesn't shoot his enemies from a safe distance like a wuss. Ars tries suggesting that he may be able to handle a bow very well, and he asks him to try it. Malay chews on his thoughts, but when other soldiers ask him to try it just as Ars suggested, he decides to give it a shot. Malay picks up a bow and arrow, but he confesses that he's never shot one before. A soldier suggests he goes closer to the target to reduce the risk of hurting others, but Ars is confident he can hit the target from his position. Malay notches the arrow and he aims the bow at the target. He lets the arrow fly and it hits the bull's eye. They think it was pure dumb luck, so they asked him to try again. Malay shoots several arrows and they all hit the bull's eye. All the soldiers around him tell him he was born to be an archer, and Malay conveniently realizes that using a bow isn't so bad, since all is fair in war. The soldiers wonder how Ars was able to figure out that Malay will be good with a bow, and he tells them it was his instinct. The soldiers are impressed by this, but Ars knows if he told them the truth about his appraisal skill, they wouldn't believe him. Though his ability was the real deal, he was not able to use it on himself, which he wasn't very happy about. During dinner time, Ars was impressed with the meal prepared by the chef. He was about to dig in when his father called out to him. His father tells him he was informed of how Ars discovered Malay's talent with a bow and he was impressed. Ars was a bit scared of his father because he always looked so angry. Ars uses his appraisal skill to look at his father's stats. He was impressed that his father was able to rise from a farmer to a noble using his martial arts prowess. His father tells him to hone his instincts because he could become the lord of the land one day. His father was convinced the ability to detect other people's talent would be useful to him in the future. His father offers him his portion of the dinner so he can grow up quicker, and Ars thanks him for that. After that day, Ars studied more about the empire and he realized that the future was a bit vague because the leaders were corrupt, several revolts were coming up amongst the commoners, and various nobles were focusing on autonomy to quell the revolts. Ars feared that the empire might enter an all-out war if things don't change for the better. He couldn't envision himself leading his troops to war, and he wonders if he'll be able to keep the people of Lamberg safe. He wanted to protect them because they were so kind to him. He remembers his father's words about his instincts, and he immediately gets an idea. He wears a costume and he goes out on the streets. He immediately uses his appraisal skills to check out the stats of the people in the town. He is exhausted after using his skill for a long time, and he sits in an alley. A woman suddenly chases a man out of her shop because she doesn't want to sell her goods to him. Ars figures out that the man doesn't look like the people in his town. A boy points at the man, who is a Malcan, and he tries to get his mom to help him, but everyone avoids him because he's filthy. Ars remembers that the Malcan are a group of people that came to Summerforth from across the sea. He knows that most of them were brought in as slaves, so he decides to offer the man his bread. Everyone wonders why the heir to House Louvent is helping Malcan. The man takes the bread and he begins eating with tears rolling down his face. Ars uses his appraisal skill on the man, and he's surprised to see that his stats are almost perfect. He knows that the man can become a great warrior, but the man gets up to leave after thanking him for the bread. Ars chases after him, but the man tells him not to follow him because the people of the town will be angry. Ars asks the man if he'll want to become his retainer, which surprises the man. Ars was planning to use his ability to recruit people with potential so his domain will become stronger. The man thinks Ars just wanted to pretend, but Ars introduces himself and shows him his family crest. The man is surprised, but Ars tells him he wants him to become his retainer because he senses he has a lot of talent. But man wonders how Ars was able to sense that, and they just met, but Ars tells him it's just something he knows. The man tells him he doesn't want to cause him any trouble because people won't like him taking a Malcan as his retainer. Ars tells him not to worry about that because he'll think of something, but the man rejects his offer and walks away. Ars keeps chasing after the man because he knows he may never find someone else with such stats. The man's stomach growls, and Ars decides to use that as leverage. He tells the man they have a chef who can make him a buffet of the food he'll love to eat. The man stops in his tracks and he decides to follow Ars home. Ars takes him home, and he can't believe Ars is truly the son of the Lord. The chef serves them some food, but they serve the man a smaller portion because he's a Malcan. Tell the Malcan to leave their house immediately after his meal, and Ars realizes the prejudice against Malcans runs very deep. He realizes he won't be able to talk the servants out of it, so he decides to share his food with the man, which surprises everyone. The maids decide to serve the man a better dish, and he eats his fill. Ars wonders what Ritsu the Malcan was doing in the village, and Ritsu tells him he was once a member of a band of mercenaries. He tells Ars they disbanded after most of them lost their lives, and he's been wandering ever since. Ars wonders why he didn't join another mercenary group, and Ritsu tells him he wasn't hired because he didn't have any accolades to his name. The servant suggests that it's time for Ritsu to leave, but Ars tells them he brought Ritsu home to make him his retainer. The servants tell him that Lord Raven will disapprove, but Ars takes the matter to him anyway. His father tells him it's unacceptable to make a Malcan his retainer, but Ars tells him they'll waste Ritsu's potential if they throw him out. His father reminds him that Malcans are inferior to them, so no Malcan have any special talent. Ars is disappointed that his father believes the conventional information about Malcans, but he tries to convince him otherwise. He asks his father to test Ritsu if he likes, and his father wonders why he's so sure of his talent. His father remembers he discovered Malay's talent, and he decides to test Ritsu since Ars insists. He tells Ars he'll employ Ritsu as a soldier if he turns out to be talented, and Ars thanks him for this. His father tells him the test will be a mock battle between him and Ritsu will be employed if he's able to beat him. Ars tries to convince his father that Ritsu is no match for him because he's so young, but his father reminds him that he said Ritsu was talented. His father decides to give Ritsu a handicap to make up for the difference in prowess, and he tells him they can proceed since he understands the terms. They walk out of the room and Ritsu wonders why Ars is trying so hard to make him his retainer. He thinks Ars is showing him pity, but Ars wonders if he doesn't want to become their retainer. He tells him he can call it off if he wants, but Ritsu tells him it's the best offer he's received in his life. He thinks the offer is unbelievable because Malcans are usually persecuted everywhere they go. Ars tells him he needs him because he's going to become the lord of the land one day and he'll need Ritsu by his side. Ritsu assures him that he'll do his best. Ritsu goes into the training room and the soldiers realize he's a Malcan. Ars's father asks Malay to prepare their swords, while Gratz brings an hourglass. He tells Ritsu to pick up a sword, and he tells him if he can land a single blow on him before the time runs out, he wins. Ars thinks Ritsu has the odds in his favor. Ars's father tells Ritsu to introduce himself before they duel, and after Ritsu does so, he introduces himself as Lord Raven. The duel begins and Lord Raven strikes first, but Ritsu gets out of the way in time. He's convinced he'll have been sliced in half, even if they're using practiced swords. The duel continues, and Ars realizes that Ritsu doesn't stand a chance, but the soldiers are surprised that he's able to hold his sword against Lord Raven. Though Ritsu was keeping up with Lord Raven, he was not able to land a hit on him. Lord Raven lands a hit that sends him to the ground, but he gets back up. Lord Raven reminds him that he has little time left, and Ritsu remembers Ars saying he needs him. He decides to go all out and he rushes at Lord Raven's. He slides under and then uses the sunlight to his advantage to try to land a hit on Lord Raven, but he blocks just in time. Lord Raven announces that the battle is over, but Ritsu looks back to see the hourglass still running. Everyone realizes that Ritsu was able to graze Lord Raven's, and they wonder who he is. True to his word, Lord Raven decides to employ him as a soldier, and Ars runs over to congratulate him on his employment. Lord Raven tells Ars his ability to sense people's prowess is top tier, and that he's confident Ars will fare well in the upcoming chaotic age. He's confident Ars will make a great lord someday. Meanwhile, all the soldiers wonder how Ritsu became so strong, and they flock around him hoping to learn his secret. Later that day, Ritsu changes into his new clothes and he promises to repay his debt to Ars with his life. The story continues. It has been several months now since Ritsu began working in the Louvent house. He trained with the soldiers each day, and all the soldiers were amazed by his skills. Though he was partaking in the war, he always stayed beside Ars. His intelligence skyrocketed after he started taking lessons, and after some time Ars used his appraisal ability on him. He was impressed to find out that Ritsu is now the most intelligent person in their house. Everyone quickly accepted Ritsu after they got to know him more and saw how gifted he was. The maids in the house were pleased to have him around, and they were also impressed by his skills and intellect. Ritsu approaches Ars and he asks him for a new lesson for that day. Ars agrees to help him study. Ritsu reminds Ars that their previous lesson covered the activities of the Summer Fourth Empire, whose aim was to reunite the 7 original nations. Ritsu recalls that Ars told him that Ansel, which is geographically isolated from the other regions, was involved in commercial activities with regions outside Summer Fourth. They did this to gain enough power to invade the other kingdoms in the Summer Fourth region. After Ansel conquered the other regions, the king of Ansel declared himself as the emperor and he named the region Summer Fourth. This was 203 years ago, and Ars confirms all that he has said. Ritsu continues saying the current Summer Fourth Empire is in decline because the current emperor is only 8 years old. This meant that his vassals were the ones with actual power, since the emperor was going to rule on his own. This spread corruption amongst the government, which led to revolts around the country. This made the dukes of each duchy ignore the empire as a whole and focus on autonomy. Though the current warfare isn't very intense, Ars is convinced there will be more severe conflict down the road, since his father is already forced to fight in the current conflict. Ars decides to use his ability to gather promising talents and prepare them for battle, even though he hopes that war doesn't break out in the future. Ars wonders where war will break out in the future, and Ritsu tells him it will probably start from the Mission region. He informs Ars that the Duke of the Duchy of Mission is very old and likely to meet his maker very soon. The Duke has 2 sons, and though the eldest is supposed to succeed him when this happens, the younger son seems more capable. The Duke was worried about who to pick as his successor in the case of his demise. Ritsu is sure that war will break out. If the Duke gives up the ghost before he decides his successor, war will break out. He's also sure war will break out regardless, even if the Duke decides, because both sons are power hungry. Ars can't believe his ears, and he wonders who his father will side with if such an occurrence takes place. Ritsu informs him that his father will likely side with the eldest son, but he knows it's not his father who will make the choice. Ars realizes his father isn't a direct vassal to the Duke of the Duchy of Mission because he's a vassal of the Canar Head, which is where Lamberg falls in. Ars realizes his appraisal ability could be useful in deciding who to side with if a war breaks out. Ars was worried because though his father is still alive, he was only a kid, and since he has only been able to scout Ritsu, he didn't want his father to fall in the minority. Ritsu tells Ars a lord can advance and rank if they play a big part in an active war. Ritsu sees that as a reason for them to continue doing their best to increase their strength, and he reassures Ars that he'll always be around to protect them. Ritsu realizes they need to scout for capable people, and he asks for Ars' assistance. Ars agrees to help him search for talented people, and Ritsu promises to accompany him. Ars and Ritsu walk out of the family house, and Ars is surprised to see his father out practicing. He noticed that his father has been practicing swordsmanship lately, and he wonders if his father is aware that a war is about to break out. Lord Raven notices Ars and he wonders if Ars is going into town. Ars informs him that he's going to look for outstanding talent, and his father advises him to look out for someone good with magic. Ars is surprised by this, but Lord Raven tells him magic will be useful in the upcoming war. Lord Raven isn't very good at magic, and he is aware that many vassals possess magic, but they're not very good at it. Ritsu realizes that there could come a time when such a mage could change the tide of war. Ars remembers a time when he cast magic because his father asked him to. Then he wore a strange tool with a ball of red liquid and he recited a short incantation, but his magic was a sight for sore eyes. After that, his father never allowed him to cast magic again, and Ars made peace with the fact that he has no magic talent. Lord Raven tells he's counting on him to find a person with magic talent, and Ars promises to do his best. They take a horse to go into town, and Ritsu is convinced their strength will increase greatly if they can find someone with enough magic talent to be useful in battle. Ars decides to look for someone with such talent for the sake of the future of his home. They arrive at the fortified city in Kanar, and Ars is surprised by the number of people on the street. Ritsu informs him that the city is home to 50,000 people, and Ars is shocked because that's 5 times the people in Lamberg. He points out the Kanar castle, and he tells Ars the castle is home to the Pyres family, which is the county chief's family. Ars notices a lot of wealthy people on the streets, and he hopes the people of Lamberg can one day live like that. Ars decides to use his appraisal skill, and he looks around trying to find someone with outstanding talent. After a while, Ars and Ritsu sit at a fountain, and Ars is bummed out because he couldn't find anyone with outstanding talent. A person's ability values are divided into numbers and competency, so no matter the number of value, without competency a person cannot perform well. Ritsu reassures him that they still have time to find someone with talent, since they just begun their search. While Ritsu is following the city map, Ars stops by an alleyway with beggars. Ritsu is telling him about a landmark, but he notices Ars is looking at something else. He approaches Ars, and he looks into the alleyway. He informs Ars that there will always be beggars as long as there are rich people. Ritsu acknowledges that saying such a thing is wrong, since Ars saved him from such a life, but he tells Ars they can't do anything for the people. Ars agrees with Ritsu, but he tells Ritsu his perspective of the city has changed after seeing people living in such conditions. He tells Ritsu he wants to make a society where there's no discrimination between the rich and the poor. Though he admits the naivety and his ambitions, he tells Ritsu he believes there's talent in everyone. Ritsu admits that he's proud to serve Ars, which makes Ars very surprised. A strange character who was spying on them walks away. They arrive at the largest market Kanar, and Ars is surprised by how much food he can set his eyes on. A trader tries to convince him to buy a dragon egg so he can have it as a pet. Ars is surprised that dragons exist, and he's even more baffled that they can be domesticated. Ars is taken in by the trader's bargains, and the trader tells him the rare eggs are worth 1 silver coin each, like someone under Genjutsu. Ars tells the trader to give him 3 dragon eggs, and he rummages through his bag for money. Ritsu isn't fooled by the trader, and he wonders why the trader sells fakes to people. He interrogates the trader with a sword, and the trader tries to feign innocence, but Ritsu is having none of that. Ritsu knew the city was no longer in trade with the continent where eggs could be found. He tells the trader the eggs are genuine because the dimensions and color are not the same as the ones he read about in books. He's convinced that the eggs are lizard eggs that the trader made out to be dragon eggs, but the trader denies it. Ritsu is about to take the life of the trader for trying to fool Ars, and the trader begins saying his last prayers. Ars intervenes and begs Wraiths to spare the trader because he is not buying the eggs anymore. Ritsu apologizes for acting without caution, but Ars thanks him for saving him from being scanned. He wonders if the other trader will fool him just like the egg trader. He decides to become more knowledgeable so Ritsu doesn't end up ending someone's life. They decide to keep looking for talent, but they take a lunch break after a while. Ritsu cautions Ars to eat slowly as he hands him a steak, but he suddenly notices a stall selling candy. He rushes over with some money and he asks the vendor to give him some, but someone bumps into him and relieves him of the weight of his pouch of money. Ars doesn't notice this, and he thinks the person bumped into him by accident because he appeared to be in a hurry. Ritsu informs him that his pouch has been stolen, and he assures him he will catch the thief. He carries Ars on his back and he begins chasing after the thief. The thief was the strange person who was spying on them earlier. Ritsu gets close to the thief and takes off her disguise. The girl runs into an alleyway and Ritsu follows him into the alleyway. The thief is suddenly surrounded by bandits, and the boss beats the little thief for trying to run away. Ars tries to intervene and stop the men from hitting the girl, but the boss is pissed off by his presence. He tries to attack Ars, but Ritsu blocks his attack and counters-attacks him. He takes down the boss and the henchmen decide to attack Ritsu. Ritsu takes them down one after the other and they turn tail and flee. Ars wonders if the girl is alright and he uses his appraisal ability on her. He discovers that she has an S-tier mage ability and a very high prowess. He sees that the girl is named Charlotte and he's surprised by her abilities despite her young age. Ars realizes that her magical power is off the charts, though she's not very skilled in other combat forms. Ritsu approaches Charlotte and tells her to return Ars's pouch, but Ars asks her to become his vassal. Ritsu is shocked by this because he thinks she's just a common thief, but Ars informs him that her magic talent is phenomenal. Charlotte refuses his offer because she doesn't want to work for a kid of his status, and Ars is shocked. He tries to convince her to lend him her powers, but she tells him she's never used magic before. Ars tells her he can see she has an impressive magic ability, and he also realizes that she steals because she has a difficult life. He tells her she could live a better life if she becomes his vassal, and she tells him that's an opinion from a noble man's standpoint. She wonders why the nobles always look down on people like her. She tells Ars she won't be a tool to protect his luxurious life, but Ars tries to convince her that he's not like other nobles. He tells her his dream is to make a city where people can live with peace of mind and without fear of discrimination. Charlotte tells him she can't wait for him to create such a utopia if he isn't sure of the day. She thinks he's trying to hire her just to make himself look good, so she refuses his offer once again. Ritsu tells her to return the pouch she stole, and she cooperates because she doesn't want to remain in their debt since they saved her. Ars wonders who the men were, and Charlotte tells him they are henchmen of some slave merchants she escaped from. Ars tries to convince her to run farther away, but she tells him she can't, and Ars wonders why. Suddenly several children come running to welcome Charlotte. Ritsu wonders who the kids are, and Charlotte tells them they are orphans living in the alleyway just like her. She tells them she can't just leave the kids like that, so Ars decides to give her his pouch. Later in the day, Ars sits on a bench outside his room. Ritsu tries to convince him to come into the room because it's cold outside, but Ars doesn't move. Ritsu tells Ars he can empathize with Charlotte because he was once like her. He informs Ars that Charlotte has probably suffered at the hands of nobles, and that's why she thinks that all nobles are the same. He reassures Ars that he's different, but Ars tells him he took his privilege for granted. Ars tells Ritsu Charlotte was right about him. Suddenly he sees the orphans running through the streets and calling out to Charlotte. Ars goes out to meet them and they inform him that Charlotte was caught. That brings the episode to an end. Thanks for watching. Want next part? Subscribe the channel and turn on notification bell.